If you are doing this, you might be killing your patient. Today I'm going to talk to you about a serious respiratory condition called status asthmaticus, severe asthma exacerbation, and what not to do so that you don't harm these patients. This is inspired by a recent patient encounter that I had. I am a hospitalist, but at night I cover ICUs. I had a patient who was intubated for status asthmaticus, and I had a hard time ventilating that patient. Nothing really worked, and the patient finally ended up being transferred to a tertiary care center for extracorporeal CO2 removal for ECMO. But I kind of learned something with my interaction with that patient and read more on this, and I decided to make this video so that you may learn from it and use it to manage your patients with severe asthma exacerbation. So I'll start out with the case. This is the patient that I told you about. She's 68, female. She has severe asthma exacerbation at home, and she arrested. CPR was started by her husband when EMS arrived, and the EMS achieved ROSC after 15 minutes of CPR, brought her intubated to the ICU. On arrival, her heart rate was 105, blood pressure 104/60, but she don't live off it. Norepinephrine drip at 0.09. Show them the mechanical ventilator, volume control mode, tidal volume 400, respiratory 20, PEEP of 5, FiO to 100%, SpO2, her saturation was 100% on this. On exam, she has faint, inspiratory and expiratory wheeze. Her ABG showed a pH of 7.05, a PCO2 of 65, and a PaO2 of 230 millimeters of mercury. Her bicarbonate serum was 27. Other electrolytes in CBC were generally within normal limits. Her chest X-ray showed something which looks like this. Is not her exact X-ray, but this is what it just looked like. So she has bilateral hyperinflated lungs, but the parenchyma looks okay. No obvious pneumothorax, and you see the ET tube in the right place. So what would be the best ventilation strategy for this patient? There could be more than one answer here. So continue the same ventilator settings as above, increase the rate to 24 to improve her pH, change to pressure control mode, inspiratory pressure over PEEP of 40/5, decrease the rate to 12 and increase the inspiratory flow rate and adjust to an IE ratio of 1:5, or disconnect the patient from the ventilator and start pressing on the chest. So think about this case. We'll go back to it at the end of the presentation. As I said, there could be more than one answer. Let's just keep it in mind. But this was the case that I had. So first off, let's talk about the initial medical management of a patient with severe asthma exacerbation. The first rule is do everything you can to avoid intubation. This intubating a patient with status asthmaticus is a nightmare. So if you can avoid it, by all means, please avoid it. So what can you do? I think everybody knows how to manage an asthma exacerbation, right? So you use your short-acting beta agonists, continuous albuterol, ipratropium. In these patients, you can give them an hour-long, 2-hour-long continuous nebulizations. Early systemic steroids, IV magnesium sulfate. But what's different in these patients is you can and you should use systemic or parental short-acting beta agonist. In this case, we're talking about epinephrine or terbutaline. Do you know why this is important? It's because sometimes your continuous nebulizations might not work well because these patients are so tight and they're not moving air well. The albuterol and the ipratropium might not make it all the way down to their lower airways, which are obstructed. So if you use a parental IM injection of epinephrine or terbutaline, you're getting there through the blood, so you have a better chance of opening up those bronchioles. At least you can help the nebulization treatment like this. And these patients are working to breathe, so you should be liberal on the use of BiPAP in these patients to support their breathing. If all fails, you also should think about using helium gas if you have the tank available in your reach. So when do you intubate? But despite all these things, it's possible that the patient might still fail and you might have to intubate. When do you make that decision? So Altered mental status is the big one. If they start becoming encephalopathic, exhaustion or silent chest. Initially, they had wheeze, inspiratory, expiratory, and then this progresses and the wheeze goes away and you don't hear much air movement in their lungs. This does not mean they're improving. This means the obstruction is getting worse. And rising PaCO2, if the PaCO2 in the blood gas is rising, then that is an ominous sign that they are going to respiratory failure. And hemodynamic instability is also another one. So one important thing here is in a patient with a severe asthma exacerbation, you expect a lower PaCO2 because of the hyperventilation. If the PaCO2 is normal and starts to rise, then that's a red flag. That is indicative of respiratory failure, and that is an indication for intubation, especially if they fail the BiPAP or non-invasive ventilation. So intubation pearls. I am not an ED physician. I'm not a critical care doctor. I don't intubate patients a lot, but these are some things that you need to take into consideration when you are intubating an asthmatic patient, or when you call the anesthesia person to come and intubate him. These are the things that you need to prepare for. One is you need to pre-oxygenate them very well, and two, for sedation, you can use ketamine. Ketamine is known to cause bronchodilation. So in patients with obstructive lung disease like asthma, use ketamine for sedation, and avoid aggressive bagging after or even before or after the intubation. Then we will discuss more about this later, and prepare for a difficult intubation. These patients, it might be a difficult intubation, so a well-experienced person should do the intubation. These are not the type of patients that you can have a resident train or practice intubating. And also use a bigger size ET tube if possible, 7.5, 8, because these patients might need a bronch down the line, bronchoscopy to clear secretions, and also you don't want to add more resistance in an already by using a smaller tube in a patient who's already has airway resistance. And also prepare for immediate hypotension, because once you tube them, they are at risk for hypotension. Why? We'll discuss this later. So once the tube is in, the real danger begins. And what is the real danger? That is ventilator-induced hyperinflation. This is the core of my talk today, and this is where I'm going to discuss more. So ventilator-induced hyperinflation is a danger. Why patients with asthma or status asthmaticus die? These patients die not because of hypoxia, but because of air trapping and dynamic hyperinflation. That's why they die. Because air trapping and dynamic hyperinflation results in a very hyperinflated lung, which leads to decreased venous return and in turn leads to hypotension and cardiac arrest, sort of like an obstructive shock. So ventilator mismanagement is a major cause of this problem. So if you want to understand dynamic hyperinflation, you have to look at this graph from the ventilator. It's not complicated. I will go through it. So you can see that on the upper panel here, you see a normal flow, and the lower panel is a flow in a severe asthmatic patient. This is flow rate, flow versus time. So you can see that in the normal patient, the ventilator delivers a breath. This is inspiration above the line, and then at exhalation, the whole delivered tidal volume will be exhaled, and the flow comes to 0. And then after some time, the next breath is initiated, and this cycle continues. But what happens in patients with status asthmaticus or dynamic hyperinflation? So the ventilator delivers a breath here, and then the patient starts to exhale the breath, but because of the severe obstruction, they cannot get the whole tidal volume that was delivered in time. It takes a long time. See how this is scooped, this exhalation curve? Yes, and then before they are able to exhale all the air that was delivered, what happens? The ventilator delivers another breath here. So this one does not come to 0. And then the cycle continues. What is happening during this time? During this time, more and more air is being trapped and retained in the lungs. And what does this cause? The lungs start to hyperinflate, expand, and expand with every breath. And this is called dynamic hyperinflation or auto-PEEP, positive index expiratory pressure, auto-PEEP. And the main problem with this is this would result in decreased venous return to the heart, and that would result in cardiovascular collapse, and these patients die because of cardiac arrest from this. There is also another problem with this, is that the more hyperinflated the lungs are, the decreased their compliance. Therefore, you'll be having a hard time delivering adequate tidal volume to these patients. So what is the ventilation strategies that we should use in asthmatic patients? The first goal is to prevent air trapping. It's not to normalize blood gases, and you should accept permissive hypercapnia. These are very important concepts. So mechanical ventilation strategy settings, the first is you can use volume controlled or pressure controlled. There's been a lot of debate about this, but generally this is preference, your personal preference, or what your institution prefers. So you can use volume controlled or pressure controlled. Studies have not shown any different outcome if you're using any of this. What matters is what kind of specific settings you use while you choose the mode. The most important thing is you need to keep the respiratory rate low. The respiratory rate of 8 to 10 to 12 should be the rule in these patients. Why? It's because high rates can lead to breath stacking or auto-PEEPing. Just remember the graph that I showed you earlier, auto-PEEPing, and it would result in cardiac collapse. So you need to give the patient time to exhale whatever is delivered to their lungs by the machine. So drop the respiratory rate. The next one is the tidal volume. So you should be using a low tidal volume. 6 to 8 mL per kg should be the standard. You don't want to give big breaths that would worsen the hyperinflation. And you need to give them a good amount of time to exhale. So you need to adjust your ventilator settings in such a way that the I to E ratio is 1 to 4 to 1 to 5, more time to exhale. And then you need to give them a high inspiratory flow. Why? That's how you can shorten the I time. You can increase the respiratory flow to 60, 80, even up to 100, so that you can get that whole tidal volume in a short amount of time and then give time for the exhalation. Also in these patients, it's advisable to use a minimal PEEP, 0 to 5. Sometimes 0 PEEP can also be applied because they already have an auto intrinsic PEEP. You don't want to add more to that obstruction, but also sometimes you might have to use a smaller amount of PEEP. So when you look at this, the whole thing is to give them time to exhale. So in these patients who come with acidosis, the reflex is to increase the respiratory rate, increase the tidal volume so that you can increase your minute ventilation, thinking that you would fix the respiratory acidosis. But that is the wrong move in these patients. You got to give them time to exhale. So drop the respiratory rate, use a low tidal volume, and increase the I to E ratio. And permissive hypercapnia. In these patients, our goal is not to normalize the CO2 level or the pH level. So our target should be a pH of 7.15 to 7.2. That's acceptable. A pH of 7.1 is acceptable in these patients. You don't have to go for like 7.3 or so, because that would cause more air trapping and more damage down the line. So allow elevated pH, CO2, it's fine. CO2 is 70, it's fine. It will just take some time, but they will blow it off at the end if you use the proper ventilation strategy. And avoid chasing normal CO2. So if the respiratory therapist is going crazy or saying that the pH 7.1, we got to do something, you got to chill and tell them that, let's give them some time. So while you are ventilating these patients, that some things could happen, like troubleshooting in these patients. So you would have rising peak pressure. Of course, rising peak pressure is kind of acceptable in these patients. Compared to other patients, these patients would have a high peak pressure due to the airway resistance. But if the plateau pressure starts to rise, then that is a question mark. The plateau pressure rises either because of significant hyperinflation or because they have developed pneumothorax on top of that. So you can allow the peak pressure to go up, but if the plateau pressure is going more than what you are expecting, 25, 30 to the most, then you need to check for a pneumothorax or possibly dynamic hyperinflation causing significantly inflated lungs is causing this. And hypotension and desaturation. If the patient suddenly becomes hypotensive or suddenly desaturates, then again, you're probably looking at a pneumothorax or severe air trapping. In these conditions, first off, rule out pneumothorax, and then second, if no pneumothorax, you need to take a salvage measure where you have to disconnect the patient from the ventilator and for 5 to 6 seconds and give them time to exhale the air. You might have to even press on their chest down to help exhale the air. Sedation and paralysis is very important. These patients need to be sedated. Deep sedation is required. As I said, you can use either ketamine or propofol. These are the two that are mostly indicated. Ketamine can cause bronchodilation. Propofol also have some inherent bronchodilatory effect, so these are needed. If you need to, and if the patient is not syncing with the vent well, you can also use short-term paralysis. Long-term paralysis might cause critical illness, myopathy, and undesired effects. So you can avoid it, but I mean, it can also be used in these patients. If everything fails, these patients, what can you do? Call your anesthesiologist and ask them if they can try inhaled anesthetics. There are studies which show that inhaled anesthetics can be used as salvage measures in these patients. And if you don't have that, or if that doesn't work, then the only thing remaining is extracorporeal CO2 removal, or ECMO. So pay attention to these. These are the ventilator settings that you need to use in your patient. Drop the respiratory rate, use low tidal volume, increase exhalation time. That is the most important thing. So the key take-home message from this is, if you don't want to kill your asthmatic patient, avoid hyperinflation, avoid overventilating these patients. Keep the respiratory rate low, keep the tidal volume low, target a pH of 7.15, and allow permissive hypercapnia. All right, so now I will display the case for you so you can look at it one more time and then give me your answer in the comment section if possible. Or also you can write or how you can approach this patient. It's open for discussion. I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope it's going to be useful in case you experience this kind of severe asthmatic patients. Thank you for your attention. I will see you in my next video. If you're interested in hospital medicine tips and practice changing updates, please check out my other videos in my YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe the channel if you like the contents. Thank you very much. I'll see you.